This KFAN podcast is sponsored by Builders and Remodelers, exclusive Twin Cities provider of Elements Windows. Get the highest quality windows at unmatchable value. Visit buildersandremodelers.com for more details.
Don't miss out on Grease at the Chanhassen Dinner Theater. You can head over to our contest page. Your chance to win a pair of tickets, including dinner for two. KFAN.com, keyword contest to enter.
There is some breaking A-section news that broke really basically since the start of the program. Hennepin County jury finds Derek John Thompson guilty today on all 5 counts of third-degree murder and 10 counts of criminal vehicular homicide for the deaths of 5 young women who were killed instantly in an absolutely vicious, brutal car crash, a story that got covered locally extensively and even nationally as well. The families of the victims packed the courtroom, according to StarTribune.com, as the judge read the verdict. After initial sigh of relief spread through the room, only muffled tears were heard as Judge Lamas read a litany of guilty verdicts on all 15 counts. We in fact had Carol Evans, Lou Ragoose on. Was it yesterday? Yeah, in fact, I think it was yesterday when they were deliberating. The closing arguments wrapped up earlier in the day, and then the deliberations had indeed begun. And in this case, the issue and this is a discussion we used to get into early and often with Joe Friedberg, and it was about how tricky. In a case like this, third-degree murder could be interpreted, how difficult it might be in some cases like this to prove. But obviously the jury in this case was indeed convinced. The 5 women were all between the ages of 17 and 20 years old. They've been getting henna tattoos, and they were preparing for a friend's wedding literally the next day.
Brutal.
They leave the mall in their Honda Civic. They're driving through a green light at the intersection of East Lake Street and 2nd Avenue South in Minneapolis. Thompson had been going speeding through northbound on Interstate 35W in a rented Cadillac Escalade. He takes the Lake Street exit at more than 100 miles per hour. Goes right through a red light and hit the intersection at the exact same moment that they were, following the green light that said they had obviously the right of way. A beyond tragic story, as one might expect. One of the jurors is quoted, a University of Minnesota student, called it a contentious deliberation over the course of 2 days. We had 6 people talking at the same time, but we were all bringing up good points. Once the jury sat down with evidence, little things like the question of whether Thompson or a potential passenger was wearing a seatbelt took incredible weight. We decided you're deciding the fate of another man's life, and you do not want to mess it up. You'll recall that there was a shocking development again, I believe it was yesterday, might have even been, or the day before, in which Thompson's brother was compelled to testify. He originally had said, I'm not going to testify, I'm taking the fifth. The judge says, we're not interested in any ancillary charges. You're not going to be asked anything about that. Basically, what we want to know, or what you're going to be asked, is whether you drove the car, because the defense, that was really the only defense I think that was offered, was throwing some doubt into who was actually doing the driving, whether it was Derek Thompson or his brother. And so he testified, and he, in testimony, confirmed that it wasn't him, but it was Derek who was driving the vehicle. And I don't really think there was much else of a defense case at that point. So all things being equal, I don't think it's a surprising series of verdicts. The issue is whether you rise to you endorse the legal definition that this fit the legal definition of third-degree murder, right? Because what you're looking for in a case like this is how draconian can you get, right? How much can you up the ante beyond the regular vehicular homicide charge to try to, I guess, mete out legitimate and fair justice, and in the name of the 5 poor individuals whose lives were lost, not to mention family members around them as well. So that's always the question. And we've had, how many cases have we had which we talked to over the years, whether it was Joe or whether it was Ron Rosenbaum, having to do with that third degree.
The depraved mind
bit. How do you prove a depraved mind? That's the key term. Exactly right. So that's where we are with that story. There's another breaking news story which we might also try to get to with in another A section part of the program that I need a little bit more information on where we are in that story. So we might get back to that as well. As I mentioned, we've got Lavelle at 5:30, and we've got Ben Goessling, another Friday regular, who will join at about 4:30 or so. We've got some text to get to that we will indeed mix in, reacting to our conversation in studio with Lindsay Whalen, who's back on Cheryl Reeves. Well, actually not back on. First time she's been on Cheryl Reeves' coaching staff officially, and what that has been like for her to get back in the quote-unquote meat grinder, the rhythms that she maybe kind of missed when she was out of the game, out of the coaching game, and no longer playing for her beloved Minnesota Lynx as well. So 64686 is the Bradshaw and Bryant KFAN text line. We'll continue in just a minute here in the Fan. There is one other A-section story that has potentially some very ominous and frightening implications as well. The Anoka County Sheriff's Office said law enforcement is searching the waste management landfill in Elk River today in connection with the disappearance of 16-year-old Manny Collins, who has been missing, I'm now reading off of a Fox9.com report, for, I believe, nearly a month. The Columbia Heights Police Department, the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension, and FBI are assisting in the search. Authorities say they're searching the landfill for evidence to help them find Collins. Now, I thought I'd heard there was going to be an update, a briefing, sometime this afternoon. I looked. I did not find said update. Perhaps it's yet to come. Perhaps I missed it. But authorities are searching the landfill for evidence to help them find Collins. Authorities have attempted to get into contact with Collins' father, but officials at the press conference say they don't know how successful, at an earlier press conference, they don't know how successful that has been. Maybe that is the latest press conference, because I'm looking at the Fox 9 piece relating to a Friday afternoon presser. Authorities are not currently searching any other landfill. So the assumption is they must have gotten some information, some tip indicating that there might be a reason to search here as well. May 8th, Collins was last seen near the area of the 4900 block of University Avenue Northeast in Columbia Heights. His mother reported she last heard from her son in a text on that day at about 4 a.m. May 29th, Manny's uncle spoke with Fox 9 about his disappearance. Again, he last seen May 8th. June 2, authorities provided an update about the investigation into Collins' disappearance, saying they've interviewed additional people and have followed up on leads, though details were vague. Now, on the 4th, Ashley Berry, the mother of Collins, sat down with Karen Scullin of Fox 9 to make a plea for answers in her disappearance, or I should say his disappearance. The next day, the Anoka County Sheriff's Office asked residents in the area where he was last seen to check their property for any suspicious actions or items. Businesses and residents in the area also asked to check their security footage for any sightings of Collins or anything that might be suspicious. Last seen in the area of University, I mentioned, in Columbia Heights, described as 5'8" and 140 pounds with black hair and brown eyes. Collins' mother, Ashley Berry, said he was staying with his father at the time. Police believe Collins went missing against his will and have a person of interest that they are not naming at this time. No one has been arrested or formally charged. Another story that sounds, fair to say, pretty ominous.
Horrible.
Right? It's
yeah.
brutal. Yeah.
Every detail is horrible.
Every detail is more ominous than the last. So if there's an update on that particular story, we will pass that along to you as well. I want to follow up, too, in this sort of A-section segment of the program, circle back on something that we got into yesterday, and it was some rather, you could say, forceful commentary from Hennepin County Sheriff DeWanna Witt, who was not pleased with some leaders that she believes had received information from her office, for example, that might have calmed some of the fears about the nature of the operation that was taking place. The big, what we call it, it's a big bust, or at least was intended to be a big bust having to do with a so-called significant drugs and money laundering operation, correct?
Yeah.
And she was pretty forceful in suggesting that to a certain extent, the job of her office and others trying to kind of keep the peace around that scene was not particularly helped by her belief that some of the people in positions of elected officials did not do a very good job of conveying some of the information they attempted to give to take away some of the angst regarding exactly what was going on during that operation. She also said, though, quote, "The overzealous showmanship of our federal partners, that's not something we share. I get it. It doesn't look good, and we will deal with some of the things that even I do not agree with," which goes back to what we talked about yesterday, circling back to it, that there are a lot of people, you could say, that whose behavior might be called into question. We heard something similar from the police chief. I think tone deaf was the term he used for the Minneapolis chief, O'Hara, regarding the approach that was taken at that particular location. So in our continuing effort to follow all aspects of the story, I wanted to add the other commentary from Sheriff Witt that was not particularly supportive of the approach, the style, apparently, that was used by what she describes as the federal partners in that particular story. And there's the debate on it is ongoing. I don't think that's going to go away anytime soon. By the way, we had, see if I can find it here. It's almost like it's too cynical to think of it this way, but it almost feels like tis the season. We had another case, this time New York, a 21-year-old man fatally shot in the neck at a crowded Manhattan graduation barbecue. So this wasn't at the actual graduation scene like we had here. It was at Mariucci.
It was.
Involving the Wayzata High School graduation.
Yep.
In this case, it was a barbecue outside the Robert Fulton houses in Chelsea. Police said Thursday, Raquise Cohen, 21, was found sprawled on a bench with a gunshot to the neck. He lived in the Robert Fulton houses just a few feet from where he was gunned down, police said. Motive not known. Police said they were looking for 3 men dressed in black and wearing hoodies in the horrifying attack. Sounded like fireworks, said a 42-year-old resident who would only give his name as Jim. So, again, you're attempting to celebrate graduation of recent Fulton House teen residents. That's basically what you're doing. And that's supposed to be a happy event, right? I mean, that's supposed to be
one of the happiest event that you have. It's
the rite of passage kind of a thing. I mean, it's one of those innocent things, right? Where we associate nothing but innocence with it, right? And celebration, the whole bit, and
hope, opportunity, the future,
the whole deal.
Yeah.
There's a writer who writes a lot on police stuff and has some history in law enforcement, and he's quoting from the New York Daily News piece on this particular issue. He quotes from the New York Daily News story that I was just quoting from. More than 200 people had gathered. Police called for crowd control after the shooting. Peter Moskos is his name, and he writes, a man would be alive if police called for crowd control before the shooting, but then with videos, police would look bad and be called racist. That's the trade-off. And it's really part of the conversation that we still don't feel all that comfortable having, that I do think in many cases it's what creates the reluctance of a police presence when one might actually help prevent certain situations, but the fear is that some of the confrontation that might take place might not be clean. It might be controversial. It's not a call for endorsing illegal, over-the-line police conduct, but I do think we've certainly seen it in this town that it is part of what ends up dictating what kind of police presence you tend to have on the front end in situations where maybe there's already enough information to think that presence might help. But if the presence is viewed as intimidation for existing, then obviously there's going to be a less chance that you're going to have that sort of a show of force in place already in situations that might prevent things, because we are in an era where anything that looks the least bit suspicious ends up going viral and ends up creating sometimes a controversy that is worthy of the attention it receives, and sometimes not so much. Let's make this the bottom of the hour pause. If you have questions for Ben Goessling on pro football stuff, he had a great conversation along with two of his Star Tribune colleagues, with Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah, the general manager of the Vikings, who just recently accepted a contract extension. I think that took place, as you said, Guardsy, on Monday.
It was actually Friday.
Was it Friday?
Yeah, because we talked about it on Enough Said, I think. It was Friday morning,
okay.
I want to say.
Maybe you're right. Okay, well,
we had a good Friday morning.
There were a couple of interesting. You will particularly appreciate one of Kwesi's answers. You will feel vindicated by one of his answers to the Star Tribune panel's questions. So we'll get to some of that with Ben. We'll get to some A-Rod stuff with him, and who knows what else regarding your favorite football team with Mr. Goessling next. Before we say hello to Ben Goessling, one follow-up regarding the Derek Thompson verdict, guilty on all counts. Want to also remind the listeners who've been following this case that, as Lou Goose tells us, the jury is now going back to consider the factors that could lead to what is described as an aggravated sentence. They have a new verdict form that they have to answer a number of different questions. They are currently being told about Thompson's prior conviction in California. So that's the next question, right? How tough will the punishment be? And obviously, if they agree on the aggravated sentence, it will be a tougher punishment than might otherwise be involved. So if we get more details on that, if there's any updates before we wrap things up at 6:30, we will indeed let you know. Ben Goessling covers the National Football League and the Vikings for the Star Tribune. And he also joins us thanks to our good friends at Standard Heating and Air Conditioning every Friday, sometimes other days as well. And he joins us now via the Connecticut Water Systems hotline. Ben, how are you?
I am doing well. How are you guys this afternoon?
We're doing okay. I want to read right off the bat an interesting text. This comes from Jonathan out of Bloomington. With Goessling coming up next, can you ask him the following question about his commitment to the show with his role as high school track and field coach? And he has the question in quotes, so I'm going to read it as he asks me to read it. Ben, for years, the Minnesota High School League hosted the Minnesota track meet on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. In 2025, they moved the meet to Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. Is there any truth that the MSHSL made the move because of you, Ben, and your commitment to being on the Bumper to Bumper show with Dan on Fridays?
I cannot confirm the internal deliberations that I might or might not have had with Minnesota State High School League over these changes to the schedule. I believe the public reason is that St. Michael Albertville, which hosts the meet, had to move it this year because of graduation, I think was what happened, but it worked out for the better.
Sure did.
I closed circuit to Paul Allen on Tuesday. I will be up there, and he and I have already talked about this, so he actually loses out this year because I will be up there Tuesday watching our guy running it. But yes, this afternoon I'm just fine. Actually, I think normally we would be Thursday, Saturday, so my schedule, the way it has been aligned by the State High School League this year and other years, works just fine for Bumper to Bumper.
Serendipitous,
so whether they did it for that reason or not, I don't know, but it tends to work out for all parties involved.
We all win. That's the good thing about it. A lot of good questions coming in, including whether or when we're going to get a resolution/ruling on the Jordan Addison suspension. Where are we on that story? Do we know?
Yeah, that is still working its way through the courts in Los Angeles, I believe. I think they've had, he has pleaded not guilty to the charge, and I think it is going to a jury trial. I believe that'll probably be coming up here in the next few weeks, and I think they had some procedural hearings in May to start picking a jury, so we'll see when that is all going to conclude. But yeah, it is worth keeping that in mind because the NFL typically doesn't rule on those things until the legal process is played out. So if that goes to a jury trial and it gets dragged out for a while yet, it's possible that the NFL won't come in with anything until that concludes. So, that process is kind of ongoing. That process is something that could stretch out for a while yet, but I would think that if he eventually is convicted of the DUI or he pleads to it, whatever would happen, that would anything other than him being exonerated, I would imagine would result in discipline from the NFL. It's typically been a 3-game suspension for first-time offenders, so we will see where that goes. But yeah, the fact that is still working its way through the courts at a fairly deliberate pace is worth keeping in mind as we're only a month from training camp now, because the NFL piece of that probably won't come until the legal case is concluded.
You guys had a nice Q&A with the Vikings general manager. Obviously, I assume the impetus of that was he gets the contract extension. And the last question, at least on the transcript version that I saw online via StarTribune.com, I want you to explain exactly what Kwesi had to say about the prospect of National Football League players, including Justin Jefferson, participating in the flag football Olympics, because I think the producer of this show will feel very vindicated by some of the things that Kwesi had to say on that particular subject.
Yeah, he certainly was. He basically said, I don't want to, be the one speaking on this entirely, but I think the concerns that he has about it are the ones that probably a lot of general managers have, in the sense that if you are going to go in and play in that thing and you're playing against somebody that is trying to make a name for themselves or isn't terribly concerned about Justin Jefferson having to go from here into training camp and lays Justin Jefferson out, that is not something that player really has to deal with. It's something that the Vikings would have to deal with going forward. So I think that is a lot of the concern with it, just in the sense that you are taking a risk. He compared it a little bit to international soccer, where they kind of put a pause in their seasons when players are going to compete for the World Cup team and the Olympic team. And if a player gets hurt, it's the club ultimately that is affected by it. So it is something that, the NFL, I think, wants to happen. It seems like the NFL has a lot of desire for stars to be on the field in Los Angeles in 2028. They've talked about how you figure this out, but I would imagine the people that are going to have the most concern about it are the people in Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah's seat, because it is something that if somebody gets hurt, it becomes his problem. So it is, I think it's something he joked with us. Well, the existence of the text thread was not a joke, but he told us that he had a text thread with Andrew Berry and one other executive that he didn't name, where they kind of just talk about all of the things that they have to deal with in these roles. And the text thread is called, "Are you sure you want this life?" So this is probably one of those things that when they get in there and talk about all of the stuff they have to deal with in these jobs, I would imagine if that's not a topic yet, it very likely could be in 3 years.
The direct quote from the Q&A, and Garzi, you will again feel vindicated by this, is, "Hey, is that player from that country who gets 1 minute to go against Justin Jefferson, is he really going to take care of Justin Jefferson the way I need him to take care of Justin Jefferson?"
I love it.
Which is exactly what Garzi had been bringing up. So, for him, he's pretty, as you know, judicious and cautious. So, to me, he went a little further down the road than we were accustomed to Kwesi going down. And it is the elephant in the room, right? I mean, it's not anything all that controversial. But you do wonder how that got sort of factored in to the league seemingly going all in on this thing. I guess from a exposure standpoint, a marketing standpoint, I don't know how much more, marketing help the National Football League needs, but I think it's a very fair question.
Yeah, I think a lot of this is the NFL sees flag football as a vehicle to do two things. It's to expand the game among girls and women, I think, in a way that, tackle football has not been able to do for a lot of obvious reasons. And then I think the other piece of this is growing the game internationally. I mean, I think Peter O'Reilly talked about this in a conference call with reporters a few weeks ago, that they see flag football and the league playing more games internationally as kind of two approaches to the same goal, where you are giving more people more exposure to American football, either by playing NFL games in those countries or by having people from other countries play American football in an Olympic setting that does not require tackling, does not require contact in the way that the version that we know and love does. So if the NFL is saying we want these things to happen and we want the growth of the game internationally to be as big of a priority as they have seemed to make it be, I would imagine they're going to try to do everything they can to have stars on the field. Because you think back to, and I don't know that this will be the same thing in terms of the impact, but you think of the Dream Team in '92 and the degree to which those players playing in that Olympic Games in Barcelona grew basketball internationally to the point now where you have Luka Doncic, you have Nikola Jokic. I mean, all of these players that have come from overseas, Dirk Nowitzki, obviously, in the last decade and a half, a lot of that impact can be traced back to that generation growing up watching the Dream Team, watching those American stars in those Olympics and World Championships and all of those tournaments that we remember. So I think the NFL, in some ways, probably is saying, if we can do the same thing where even if it's our stars blowing everybody out, that this becomes a marketing vehicle in some ways for the game on an international level. And it does. I mean, the big question with this that may grind the whole thing to a halt is, what do you do if somebody gets hurt? Because there is no way to make the Vikings whole if Justin Jefferson tears his ACL on a flag football field in 2028. There's just nothing you can do to replace the impact of losing that player. So I think that is going to be a lot of the discussion about this over the next few years. There's financial components to it, but there's also competitive components to it that I just don't know that anybody can really ensure a team is going to come out on the other side of it without things they're going to regret having been part of the process. Ben
Goessling joining us on The Fan, brought to you by Standard Heating and Air Conditioning. Ben, of course, writes for the Star Tribune and StarTribune.com and joins us weekly. Lavelle, a teammate, will join at 5:30 tonight. Another good question from the audience. This is Kyle checking in from Isanti. Any Jordan Mason sightings to this point? Have we seen him in shorts? And, any thoughts early on how he might fit in? I mean, he's certainly a promising pickup, I think, that might be, more than sneaky good. What have we seen or heard so far?
Yeah, I mean, seeing him in a couple of OTAs, he has been on the field. He certainly is the type of running back they wanted. And we saw him in that game against the 49ers where he was awfully effective against the Vikings as well. But he adds a physical type of runner to this offense that I think they are very interested in featuring or sort of co-featuring alongside Aaron Jones. I mean, this is a group that I think wants to be more physical. I think the investments they made up front would indicate that. And I think them bringing in Jordan Mason is part of that as well, because they knew they needed to add a running back alongside Aaron Jones. That was going to be something I think they would have addressed in the draft if they didn't do it in a trade. But the fact that they got that type of running back, I don't think was an accident. I think they want somebody who can hit more downhill runs behind double team blocks that you're going to see up front. I think they wanted somebody that was better in 3rd and 1, better in 2nd and goal from the 1, where you just are going to be more effective if you can line up and punch it in to get a yard or to get the ball into the end zone, rather than having to draw up the greatest play with jet motion that gets everybody going the wrong way and then creates an open window for J.J. McCarthy in the back of the end zone. Sometimes it's just easier to be able to line up and reset the line of scrimmage, get a yard, and put it in the end zone. So I think a lot of the concerns with how they have performed in those settings was what drove that move, and I expect he's going to be a big part of it. It certainly looks like a physical presence. We haven't seen anybody in pads yet, and we won't see that until training camp, but I have certainly noticed him both in how they've used him and kind of the figure he cuts on the field. So I think certainly it's a good point. It's a guy that I would suggest to keep watching through the next couple of months here.
Do you think there's any chance internally Vikings big shots, including the quarterback whisperer, might be getting a little bit nervous about some of the quarterback comps that are being offered up already within the team on J.J. McCarthy? He's already been likened in one way or another to Josh Allen and Joe Burrow, and we haven't even hit training camp yet.
Yeah, I mean, the J.J. McCarthy love train is approaching full speed. I think it has certainly been something that has picked up this week. I mean, Harrison Phillips saying he reminds me of Josh Allen, and certainly something that I took note of, and I think a lot of people did, because it was not a comparison that you kind of just make offhandedly. I mean, Harrison Phillips played with Josh Allen. He was there for a lot of Josh Allen's rise to becoming one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. And he talked about it more from the standpoint of the confidence and just the general aura that J.J. McCarthy brings. But I don't think you're saying that if you don't think the player has the ability to back it up. So, yeah, it's a good question, because they have tried, I think, in a lot of ways to keep the lid on this, and they have tried to say, we want this to happen on our timetable. We don't want people to be, projecting the moon for him, so that if he has a couple of bad games early, everybody starts to say, well, what happened? We thought this kid was going to be the next Patrick Mahomes, and he's not. I mean, I don't think they have wanted it to go that way, but at the same time, they have players saying these things, I think, because they've seen enough good things in practices that everybody's excited about it. I mean, when Kwesi talked with us yesterday, he was not terribly shy about J.J. McCarthy either. He said it's a projection because he didn't play as much in college as a lot of guys there, didn't throw as much in college as a lot of guys do. But he basically said, we have the best QB incubator in the NFL, and we have a player that brings everything we want to the position. So he basically said it's a bet, but I'm going to bet on those things. So it is changing, and I think it's different than the way they have talked about wanting it to happen. And that, Kevin O'Connell's opinion on this is probably the one that's the most important. But when players are saying the things that they're saying, and Kwesi is saying the things that he said to us, it's an indicator of how excited they are about him. That's for sure. I'm
scrolling here, the exact description of JJ. You have a quarterback PhD or a QB Nobel laureate in your building. That's a new one. I had not heard that expression before. Yeah. Right?
Yeah, that was, I think, a description of KOC there.
Yeah. Yeah, that's descriptive, and that's pretty imaginative as well, for sure. Look, we've talked a lot on the show this week about, I think, and maybe this was inevitable regardless of these comparisons, but I'm really getting more and more of the sense that even though people like to think and like to say, hey, I'm logical. It might take a minute for JJ. There's going to be bumps in the road, etc. The feeling I quite frankly get, in part because of what they've built around him or what they think they've built around him, is I think he's going to be judged on a really tough curve, whether it's fair for him or not, from his that very first Monday night game in Chicago.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it is going to be something where there's going to be a lot of preseason hype about them and the offseason that they had. And the question will be framed a little bit as, this is a team that can win a Super Bowl or make a run towards one if J.J. McCarthy is up to the task. And is he going to be up to the task? I mean, it's not that simple, obviously. There are more things that go into it. I think the cornerback position is one that I would bring up in terms of the other things that have to go right for them to win. This is not a binary thing about, is J.J. McCarthy good enough to get them there or not? But with what they have around him and with the things that they have said and felt about him, and I think even just the fact that he's as known of a commodity as he is, having won a national championship in Michigan and having been a guy that has been in the spotlight for a while, it is a very unique position, as I think we talked about a little bit, because you have a team coming off a 14-win season in one hand, and you also have a team that has been desperate for a franchise quarterback. This is not a team that is coming off a 14-win season and it's been, we've had the guy over and over and over. A lot of fans want their answer to what they see other teams have, most notably what they've seen the Packers have for the last 30-some years. So I think that all fuels this position that he's going to find himself in. And I think the best thing he has going for him is he does have a pretty level head about the whole thing. I mean, I don't think he's afraid of the spotlight. I think he's spent enough time in it that he's not freaking out about that. And I don't think he is somebody that is particularly intimidated by the glare, because he has done it. And I think he has spent enough time thinking about what that means and probably what it doesn't mean to have a relatively healthy approach. He's still 22. He's going to have things to learn. And I think Kevin O'Connell is going to remind everybody of that as often as he gets a chance to do it. But yes, it is an extremely interesting place for J.J. McCarthy to find himself. And that will no doubt be the story of the 2025 season.
Rodgers officially now lands in Pittsburgh. The reporting nightmare on this story presumably is now over for you guys officially. Any final thoughts now that he's there? I mean, I guess it was kind of inevitable that was where he was going to end up. It was just a matter of when he would come to terms. In Pittsburgh, the Steelers certainly seemed quite willing to be patient and to work, in this case, on Rodgers' timetable.
Yeah, they did. And I think it had become evident for a while that was going to be the place for him to go if he was going to play. I think on the Vikings perspective, I mean, there certainly was interest and there certainly was discussion about what it would look like. That goes back to the fact that Kevin O'Connell and Aaron Rodgers have known each other for a very long time. They go back to, the West Coast QB circuit where they're kind of both coming through and they're both high-level prospects. And, you're playing on all-star teams and QB camps and all these kinds of things. So those two are effectively contemporaries in a lot of ways. It's just Kevin O'Connell got into coaching sooner because his playing career didn't go as well as Aaron Rodgers. But they are only, I think, about a year and a half apart in age. And I think that's where the relationship started. So it was a conversation. I think it's one of those things that there were people in the building that were intrigued by it. Certainly there were people that said, let's take a look at this. But it, from my understanding, never got to a point that matched exactly the level of discussion about it, because there was, I think, a very narrow window in which it was going to work for the Vikings and probably one that would have worked for Aaron Rodgers. I'm not sure it's a scenario the Vikings would have been open to doing. So it was a fun talker. It was something that I think the storyline, him completing the Favre loop from the Packers to the Jets to the Vikings would have been, the symmetry would have been delicious, but the Vikings' approach to it, I don't think was ever going to match the level of speculation from it. And if anything, the brief taste of it that they got, to me, was a reminder of, if you bring him into your building, you are saying we are okay with this and everything that comes with it. And it will be very interesting to see how Mike Tomlin, one of the most decorated, most experienced coaches in the NFL, works with Aaron Rodgers. We'll get to see him again in a international setting for the second year in a row. But yes, the marriage there is going to be very fascinating to watch, no doubt about it.
We appreciate the time as always, sir. Have a wonderful weekend, and we'll chat next week. Thank you, Ben.
All right, sounds good. Thanks, Dan.
Ben Goessling, brought to you by Standard Heating and Air Conditioning, Star Tribune and StarTribune.com, and a weekly contributor, highly valued by the Bumper to Bumper crew. Lavelle, in about 35 minutes or so, maybe a little less. Top 5 at 5 will include
the Twins, Chris Finch to the New York Knicks, and the Pacers shot heard in Indy, Oklahoma City, Portugal, Spain, and Korea.